Good morning, gamers. This is video number 1. We'll give it a shot. I want to caution everybody, I'm outside, so anything can happen. A wild squirrel jumps out of the lilac bush over here. You may see more than you ever wanted to see. So here we go. These notes go with lesson 3 from unit 3, the PowerPoint. I'm going to post that. And I'm just going to talk you through what I'm covering with a few amusing anecdotes thrown in, as I always do. All right, let's see. The End in the Desert, February 14th to May 13th, 1943. But first, coffee. When the Americans end up in North Africa and they're about to attack the Germans from the west, and Montgomery is attacking from the south, we get into a little trouble before we kind of get our mojo. And I had to fix my shoes, sorry. Anyway, the trouble happens at a place called Kasserine Pass. And the situation is something like this. The American commander, General Friedendahl, did not have his act together, and things had been way too easy. And when Rommel pulled his troops back from General Montgomery's British forces and turned them against the Americans, things went very badly over several days. It all started around, the big change started around Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1943, and progressed. By the 19th, the Americans were in bad situation. Two groups of Americans were completely cut off and surrounded by the Germans. The Germans just seemed to be pouring through everywhere, and there was nothing the Americans could do to stop them. And then by the 21st, 22nd of February, things got even worse, and under Rommel's command, the Germans basically broke through and got into the American rear areas and just chewed them up. The Americans were on the run pretty much everywhere. The attack ended only because the Germans essentially ran out of gas and overextended themselves, not because they were losing. The Americans got a breather, and General Friedendahl was immediately sacked. He got replaced by General Patton, George Patton. And this is Patton's moment of glory. He takes charge sometime around the end of February, beginning of March, and within a week he has turned the army around. His intent was that the Americans are more afraid of him than they are of the Germans. He succeeded in that. And if you remember the video clip we watched one of the last days we were together, talked about, it was the clip where Patton gets attacked by the Luftwaffe. Anyway, once Patton's in charge, he wins the Battle of El Guitar. We watched a little video clip on that the last time we were together. And Patton and his sidekick, Omar Bradley, these two American generals, kind of lead the charge across North Africa, defeating the Germans from that point on. Montgomery continues to be the guy coming up from the south, defeating the Germans. And between these two fronts, I guess you'd call them, one coming east and one coming north, the Germans get trapped in that little area of Tunisia where they've got the Mediterranean behind them and the Americans, the British in front of them, and they have to evacuate. The Americans could have done a lot better job squishing them and trapping them all there. The Americans and British did not do a very good job, and a lot of them escaped to Sicily, which wasn't that far away by boat. So, but the vice closes by May 13th, and 1943. 275,000 Germans are captured, and Italians. Massive surrender of 250,000 of the enemy. A lot of different German and Italian generals are captured, but not Rommel. Rommel, who is suffering from typhus, cholera, exposure, exhaustion, you name it, he's got it all. He's just become mentally unable to function, and he's evacuated by Hitler. Hitler, not because he cares about Rommel, but the other thing is he doesn't want Rommel to be one of the guys who gets captured by the Americans so they can then use that as a propaganda thing. So once Rommel gets recalled for medical reasons, it's pretty much over. And as I said, I think in our last time together, when Patton discovers that he's been tricked and he didn't, in fact, beat Rommel, he beat one of Rommel's generals, he's very upset about this. And so he cannot wait for the next step to happen where he can get into a fight with the Germans again. That time will come. The aftershocks of North Africa are that had the Germans had the time and resources, they could have evacuated most of their troops. So there were not as many troops as they would have liked to defend Sicily. The Italians, same. It's a major victory for the Americans because all of the North African coast being available now means that the Allies can put airfields all across the coast of North Africa and control the Mediterranean Sea. And from these airfields, they can start bombing southern Europe, southern Germany, southern France, all of Italy, and even into Yugoslavia, places like that. So the end of that slide is basically we complete the capture of North Africa and move on to the next step. Now, planning-wise, the next step is the Casablanca Conference, which is the next slide in your little slide stack there. The Casablanca Conference happens in January 1943. Roosevelt sneaks over there on a ship, and he's got a couple, I don't know if you know this or not, but he's got a couple body doubles. And they continue to make appearances from a distance in the United States. But as a joke to the media, he invites them all to watch the movie Casablanca the night before he actually goes to Casablanca. It's only days later they figure out he's left the country and actually he's in Casablanca. Only news people that were allowed to go with him actually knew what was going on, and they couldn't publish any news until he got there and he was safe. Churchill flew down, I think I mentioned that. And when they were down there, they took de Gaulle with him. So de Gaulle uses North Africa as the new homeland of the Free French. And then, because all the French colonies that were Vichy now become Free French again. And he also, the other guy who's invited is the leader of the Vichy French, who has agreed to cooperate with the Allies. He mysteriously dies. Yeah, mysteriously dies. A few weeks later, he's assassinated. That is shocking. I'm sure de Gaulle got that to happen. Well, at this meeting, his name is General Giraud. At this meeting, they hammer out 4 main points that you need to know. The first is unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. That's Roosevelt's requirement, that there will be an unconditional surrender. That's a very American thing. Thanks, General Grant. The second thing is they're going to invade Europe through Sicily and then get into Italy. That's Churchill's plan, because Churchill believes if they invade Italy itself, Mussolini will drop out of the war, the Italians will surrender, and that will take the Axis powers down to 2. Churchill is right. That is exactly what happens. The Americans are pushing hard for a cross-channel D-Day-like invasion in 1943, and the British keep saying no. Do the Sicily-Italy thing first. And so the British win. The British really dominated the Casablanca Conference. The Americans were not on their game for this one, and the British came with all their binders ready to go. And so every argument there was, the British had 10 reasons why you need to do it their way, and the Americans had no plan. So, except, defeat Germany, kill Hitler, capture Berlin, which was unrealistic. So no cross-channel attack in 43, but everybody agreed there would be a cross-channel attack in 44. Now, you may note when I said who came to Casablanca, Stalin wasn't there. Stalin wasn't going to leave Russia because he believed if he left, there'd be a coup d'etat and he would never be able to retake power. So they shared all this information with Stalin. Stalin was cool with it because invading Italy, Europe from the south would take the pressure off of him, and as long as he knew that there was another invasion coming in 44 to attack from the west, that would take the pressure off him. He could live with that, and so that's what happened. They just let him know. The other thing that happened at Casablanca was the plan for Operation Husky, and Operation Husky is the invasion of Sicily itself. They put together a whole new invasion force. They learned from all the mistakes during Operation Torch of what not to do during an invasion. They figured out all the kinks for the airborne part, the naval bombardment part, the landing part, the unloading part, and they put it all together for Sicily. Now, it was going to be the same kind of thing, airborne operation, naval bombardment, and then landings. The two generals that they decided they were going to put in charge, the first one, from the American point of view, is going to be Patton. And from the British point of view, Montgomery. So you put both divas in the same event and use the fact that they want to outdo each other as a motivating factor. Eisenhower totally used them against each other to outdo one another to capture Sicily quickly. He would say things like, I don't know, whoever captures this particular city first, I guess, gets all the glory. So immediately they both believe it's going to be them, and they push hard to do it. This also leads to the lifelong hatred of Montgomery by Patton, and vice versa. Montgomery hated Patton to the end of his days. They both saw each other as pompous, self-centered, egotistical, and slightly sociopathic, and they're both right. So anyway, the invasion goes down July 9th to August 17th, 1943. The invasion is a success, but there are a couple things you need to know. The Germans bombed the invasion fleet, and the invasion fleet fired everything they could into the sky at them. And then an hour or so later, the Germans came back, and they were flying very low and slow, and the Americans just had a field day shooting down all of their aircraft until they realized that they were not German aircraft. They were the American transport planes bringing in the paratroopers that they were shooting down into the ocean. Oopsie. So lesson learned on that one. Find a way to recognize American planes in the sky, even if no one tells you they're coming. Communications problem. Nobody told them they were coming. The parachute drop itself was okay, except for all the planes they lost. Like 250 paratroopers died from American gunfire shooting them down as they flew over the invasion fleet preparing to drop. But other than that, the drops went okay. The British also had a parachute drop in front of their landing zones. And so in Sicily, the Allies learn again what to do, what not to do. And as I said, the invasion of Sicily goes until August 17th. And at the end of August 17th, again, they've squeezed the Germans and Italians into the tiny little bit of Sicily that's right across the Straits of Messina from the toe of the boot of Italy. And once again, the Allies have an opportunity to squish those German units. Units like the Hermann Goering Luftwaffe Division, crazy sounding names, but anyway, the Germans end up losing most of their tanks and armor. They have to leave most of their vehicles and things behind, but the well-trained, battle-hardened troops, a lot of them escape across the channel to Italy itself. So they'll live to fight another day. Once again, opportunity lost. So in the meantime, another conference goes down, the Cairo and Tehran conferences, one of them in November, one of them in December. The Cairo conference happens because now that they control North Africa, why not? They invite, the Cairo conference is important because they invite Chiang Kai-shek. And so it's Roosevelt and Churchill hanging out with the Chinese leader, talking about how they're going to beat the Japanese and the next steps in Japan and defending China. And then a week or two later, they go to Tehran, which is Iran, right? Iran at that time had an American and British military support structure in their country that was there to keep the oil flowing to the Allies and keep it from falling into the hands of the Germans or maybe the Russians. But anyway, they invite Stalin to this, and Stalin agrees to come to Tehran because he can be back in Russia within an hour or so. So he's not so worried about a coup d'etat happening. So he goes, and also it's winter, so the German attacks have slowed down. So Stalin goes to that conference, and so you got Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt at the Tehran conference, and this is where they reassure Stalin and tell him all about the invasion that's going to come in the spring, early summer of 1944, within 6 months, and how it's going to go down and allow Stalin to not have to fight the Germans by himself. The last thing I have in the notes, also coming out of this, they agree to unconditional surrender for Japan. Same. They would take everything away from Japan that it gained even before World War II, even before World War I. Everything was going to be taken from it. Any colony that was part of China that the Japanese controlled would go back to China. All the colonies that Japan took over when the war began would be returned to their former owners, although that's not what they tell them. They tell them they're all going to get independence, so they'll fight back like in French Indochina. And then Korea will become a free country on its own. That's the plan. Japan will have to give it back. Anyway, out of those conferences, everybody's got a way forward as they go into 1944. The last thing I want to talk about is the invasion of Italy itself, which takes place in September. Again, it's a joint attack, but this time the two parts of the attack happen further apart. The Americans land at Salerno, if you've ever heard about Sorrento glass, or that beautiful part of Italy south of Naples. That's where they land. And it's there on the south side of the, I guess you'd say, south of Naples, not too far from Mount Vesuvius, really, in Pompeii. And then the British land more towards the toe of the boot of Italy. And these two forces eventually link up. The commanding officer in Italy, his name is General Mark Clark. And Mark Clark and Montgomery served together side by side. Patton isn't there. Patton's been pulled back for the two things. One, he got in trouble in Sicily for slapping a soldier. And so he's in political timeout by Eisenhower. But secretly, he's been put in charge of an invisible fake army that is there designed to fake out the Germans and make them think the invasion's going to happen at a different part of France than Normandy, at a place called Calais. And so Hitler's, Freudian slip, Patton is put in charge of this fake out, invisible pretend army. And if you've ever seen, there's a movie on Netflix that's really cool called Ghost Army. You should watch it. It's about how they get all these artists and people together to create the fake army and fake out the Germans. With everything from balloon tanks to recordings of tanks moving that they would play on loudspeakers to make the people of England think that there were tanks in the forest when really there's just a truck with a loudspeaker. Anyway, something to watch on Netflix other than Hunger Games or something Tiger King. Please don't watch that. My family watched it, and frankly, they'll never be the same. Anyway, that's our first video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everybody's keeping it real. And I have no idea how long this will take to upload, but my goodness, it's like 19 minutes long. All right, everybody have a great day.